Hello and welcome back to RPMbassy. Today we're talking about a slightly different sort of swing than we usually do. This is a video game soundtrack, and it's sort of the one that started it all for me personally in terms of my enjoyment of gaming and my enjoyment of sort of composing music as well in many ways. So this is the Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy VII OG vinyl. It's so called. It's not a particularly catchy title from Square Enix. Pretty understated front cover and indeed back cover. Now this was released on the 29th of January 2020, before all of the stuff happened. And this is, I think, in many ways quite an understated package in general. It's quite plain, I will say that, and while it's something that I'm very happy to have, it's also something that I recommend if you don't have it, you do not get. This, in terms of sort of current trending prices, it seems to be sat at around £120 minimum, and I've seen some people, obviously, you know, they'll never sell it, but I've seen some people list it for as high as £700, which definitely do not pay that for this. I would say don't pay that for any vinyl, if I'm entirely honest. There's very few pieces that I would ever consider even thinking about at that price, but especially this. So this is essentially a sort of summation of some of the sort of best tracks from the remake of Final Fantasy VII and indeed the original release of Final Fantasy VII from 1997. So vast majority of the music composed by Nobuo Uematsu, who I've spoken about on the channel a couple of times before. And yeah, this is essentially one LP for new tracks, which are mainly, you know, remixes and interpolations of the original ones, and then another LP of the original tracks. They are picture discs as well, which I think is kind of like, that was really the selling point for me, and I think that's kind of the biggest part of the presentation, which I really appreciate. So you've got the actual remake LP itself with Cloud there in all of his sort of modern high resolution glory, Sephiroth on the back there as well, same again, and then you've sort of got a same version of that in the original. So this would have been the cover used on the sort of North American releases, not in the European or PAL releases, but North American people will recognise that as the cover from the original game, and then that a shot from one of the cutscenes in game. You know, they're kind of, you know, it's a mirror image from different eras essentially. As I said, I would not recommend trying to pick this up at the kind of the cost that it's going for these days, because as far as a package goes, that's kind of it. You know, you've got this sort of fancy, shiny Buster Sword cardboard outer, well, not sleeve, but outer packaging. You have fairly simple OBI, which goes with it, but that is literally what you get. There's nothing else with it, and the initial price was £60, which is fine. You know, for 2 picture discs, okay, fair enough. But for me, you know, something like that, especially it was released sort of just before the actual remake of the game released, and if you want me to be excited, if you want me to, you know, treat this as like some sort of celebration of the music, like really go all out. Like I would have loved to see some, you know, inserts with like, you know, graphics, some artwork, some, you know, notes about the composition. You know, there's definitely been other albums that Square Enix have released where they've had composers like Nobuo Uematsu that actually write things for them, and for this to just have like literally nothing is a real letdown. And I don't know why they didn't like go all out with it, because this would have been like their biggest release in years. certainly the game itself would have been, and it's kind of the thing they've sort of hedged all their bets on, for better or worse. I'm not a big fan of the remake at all, but this should have been their sort of opportunity to really go for it, and they didn't, and it's a real shame. And while I'm on that subject, I think, and this isn't just Square Enix, but other companies as well, why, if you're putting together a soundtrack or a score on vinyl, why do you not, at the very least, give an option of having a release that has every track? I know that it is something, it's going to be prohibitively expensive for most people, because, like a game like Final Fantasy VII, it's got like 112 tracks or something ridiculous like that. I get it. We're looking into like having like 20 sides all in all on vinyl, but at least give us the option. I want a complete collection of these things, and it feels like they're kind of just sort of leaning on the same tracks again and again. And I will say, the tracks that they've chosen, they are very good. There's some classic tracks on here. You've got the Prelude theme, which if you're familiar with Final Fantasy in general, everyone knows that song. It's kind of like the first thing that hits you when you turn on most of the games. You've got the main theme of Final Fantasy VII, which is represented on both the original and the remake as well. You've got Tifa's theme, which is a fantastic composition, probably one of the best in the entire game. The OG side does have a few more tracks than the remake side, which I think is for the better. That's the soundtrack I prefer. It's the game that I prefer. And yeah, they've chosen some good options. They've included the opening bombing mission track, which again is like an iconic song for not only the game but the franchise as a whole. But again, there's sort of some slightly deeper cuts from the soundtrack, which I'm sorely missing, and I wish they could have. Maybe if this had been a release of, hey, here's 2 albums that we're putting out separately. Here's an album for the remake. Here's an album for the original, and it's like a celebration of the IP as a whole. Even if they didn't do every single song, maybe let's do like a 4 LP set of each, and try and cram as much as possible in there. Really, really go for it, and celebrate the great music that these games have, that have been, they've been critically acclaimed for the music. It just feels like such a kind of like step in the wrong direction, and kind of indicative of what Square Enix are like in general these days, if I'm entirely honest. As far as the sound goes, picture disc, we know sort of like where that can sort of go wrong. These are fine. They're not amazing. I've seen reviews both in the overly positive and the overly negative. Some people saying it's the scratchiest thing in existence, and it sounds inaudible, and some people saying it sounds pristine and clean. It is neither of those things. It sounds fine. Like it's entirely listenable, and it's an enjoyable listen at that. So, sound wise, it's all good. We've got no issues there. As I said, I wish the selection of songs was a lot bigger. I wish they had put a little bit more in the package for us. Let's have some notes. Let us have some detailed information on the composition of the songs. Let us know what gear was used on the tracks. I think that's the kind of thing. You've got such a niche product in that it's a vinyl of a video game. You're already going for a particular type of person. Where's the harm in including some information on how it was composed? I feel like the Venn diagram of people who would be interested in that process and who would be buying this regardless is pretty much a full circle anyway. I don't think there's that many people that wouldn't care about it. So just include that sort of stuff. That sort of thing. I feel like I'm being very overly negative of it, but I think it's a great sounding sort of option when you see it on paper, but when it comes out, it's just like, where's the love, But yeah, I feel like oftentimes on the channel I'm very positive about everything I review, and I like to highlight you know, underappreciated music where I can, or just, you know, some classics, obviously. But this is something that I think I really want to bring this sort of to light, because it's something that I've thought about for a long time. How video game soundtracks, they always seem to miss the mark when they get released on vinyl. Something hopefully will change one day, and we'll be able to give the people who want to spend the extra money the option to spend the extra money and just buy the whole lot. That's what I want. So yeah, a bit of an overly negative one, but as I said, you know, this isn't something that I recommend going and picking up anyway. I think if you want to listen to the soundtrack, either play the games or go and get them on streaming services, or for the original at the very least, you can get it on CD, and that is a complete collection, and that is a fantastic package. So yeah, that's where I'll leave it for now. Not a recommendation from me. I'm glad I have it. I'm glad that the picture discs are as nicely made as they are. Sound-wise, it is what it is. You don't need it for the music enjoyment side of things if you're not that bothered. Yeah, Square Enix, do better.